Just apology, English is not my native language, so I will make many errors, I think, but I will try to present you something fluently as quick and as possible, and forgive me, please. What I want to say is to show you on my beautiful, my most favorite program, which is Ancestry UK, how the family tree of the Tolkien family looks. And also I would like to show you J.R.R. Tolkien and all his known ancestors up to the 16th century. This is a family tree which I made using information from many sources, archives, church books. This is the fruit of my very, very long research in which I proved that the Tolkien family came to England not from Saxony as Tolkien claimed, but from East Prussia, first from Gdańsk, Danzig in German, which was in the time of Tolkien's town in Poland, but earlier from Prussia, East Prussia, as Tolkien wrote in his memories from his family tradition that the Tolkien family had many problems with the Prussian state. It is proved in this research. I will start with John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. I hope you can see this panel. This is how ancestry looks. I can show you also the family tree. Maybe we will start with this. So here you can see John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. You can see his father, Arthur, the father of his father, grandfather, John Benjamin, great-grandfather, George Tolkien, a very interesting person, ancestor who was born in Gdańsk but died in London, John Benjamin Tolkien the first. His father, Christian Tolkien, he was born in Prussia, but he moved to Gdańsk and he died in Gdańsk. His father, Christian, Michel, and the oldest from the 16th century, Friedrich Tolkin. Probably his father was Jakob Tolkeimer, and probably, but I have only documents with the family names and with the same places, village Globunen, town Kreuzburg in East Prussia, but I am not sure if they were ancestors or maybe cousins. Maybe in future I will find the resolution of this problem, of this question. But I think it is impressive that we know so much about the ancestors of John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. Well, let us start with him. He was born, as you remember from his biography, in South Africa, in Bloemfontein, because his father found job there in the Bank of England or Bank of Africa. And he was born in 1892. Also, his younger brother, as you remember, you can see here, siblings, Hilary Arthur Reuel Tolkien. The mother was Mabel Suffield and father Arthur Tolkien. As you can see, ancestry provides many ways to show the relations, some facts from lives, and here you can see many interesting facts. I have found many interesting histories which were not known. For example, I found documents in which wife of Arthur, Mabel, had to be baptized a few days before the marriage in South Africa because she belonged to a branch of the Christian church in which the adult persons were baptized. So her during the baptism of Mabel, Arthur, her future husband, was present as godfather. It's very interesting. I think nobody knew about this before this research, or maybe knew, but it was not known to the public. And we know everything about the life of John Ronald Tolkien, so maybe let us move to Arthur, who is more mysterious person. And he was born, I found many addresses of the Tolkien family, and he was born on February 18th, 1857 in Hensworth in Staffordshire in England. And his father was John Benjamin Tolkien. We'll see him later. And so he was born in Midlands of England, and he changed addresses together with his family. For example, when he was 4, they lived by Heathfield Road in Hensworth. And here you can see his siblings. There were a lot of them. There were Mabel Tolkien, Grace Bindley Tolkien, Florence May Tolkien, Frank Winslow, Marian Howard, Wilfrid, Mary Lawrence. There were also half-siblings, Jane, Emily, Louisa, and John Benjamin Tolkien, the fourth of this name, because there was a tradition among the Tolkiens who came from Gdańsk to England that the descendants of Johann Benjamin Tolkien, born in Gdańsk, in every generation, the oldest member of the family was baptized as John Benjamin. And our professor was to be baptized with these names too, but his mother Mabel didn't like this tradition, and maybe she didn't like the name Benjamin, which was probably in her eyes some memory of the very radical Protestant sect to which they belonged. They were so-called pedo-Baptists or Independists, Congregationalists, very interesting type of Christianity, which was based partly on Calvinism. I will tell about this later. And here you can see many addresses. They changed the places, and he was employed in Bank of Africa when he was 31. And he died when he was 38 in February 1896. And he was buried in Bloemfontein. His grave renewed is still existing there. And his father was John Benjamin Tolkien, who was born in London, in fact in Pentonville, a part of Islington in Middle Essex. Now it is part of London, Greater London, and the exact address of their house, the family house where 3 generations of the Tolkien family lived in London, it was 77 White Lion Street in Pentonville. Unfortunately, this house doesn't exist anymore, but we can see neighbor houses because it was a street and a suburb with a very unified architecture in Georgian style. I wrote a lot about this on my blog, so we can check it. And he was baptized in St. James's in Clerkenwell. There was necessity, I think, among people who are not in official Anglican church. They were members of the first, when they arrived in England, they were Methodists, but Calvinist Methodists of Lady Huntington connection, connected also with the London Missionary Society, London Bible Society, and they attended the chapel of St. James in Pentonville, which officially was Anglican, but it had low church priests, pastors, and it belonged, in fact, to this connection. The idea in the beginning of these Methodist movements was not to leave the Anglican Church, but to stay in it with a special new way of being Christian, reading Bible, meeting in small prayer meetings, to make deeper activity in the church, very personal relationship with Jesus Christ. It's very interesting. You can read about this in many places. So John Benjamin Tolkien was a son of George Tolkien, which our biographers, for example, Carpenter, they thought earlier that his full name of this father of John Benjamin Tolkien was not George Tolkien, but George William Tolkien. It's not true. George William Tolkien was one of sons of George Tolkien. As you can see here, the oldest one, George William Tolkien. There was also Eliza, William Murrell, Mary Ann, Maria, Henry, a famous person, but I think this is the first Tolkien who has a photo. And other people. There were about 14 kids. I found a lot of kids of this family, of George Tolkien and Eliza Lydia Murrell. So J.R. Tolkien's grandfather was born in London, and he was baptized officially in Anglican Church, but his family belonged with Calvinist Methodists, which later changed into some kind of Congregationalists. And you can see here his marriage. He was 25. This is my discovery, that he had in his life 3 wives. First was Emma Baker, and they got married in Southampton, but she died very soon in 1834. And the second marriage with Jane Holmwood in London, in Bloomsbury, was when he was 28. He didn't have any children with Emma Baker, so maybe it's the reason she was forgotten. And then the second wife was Jane Holmwood. He got married as a widower. And they lived in London. Their place was 22 Newington Place, Kennington, England, and they had few children, but then I don't know of which reason, maybe some kind of agreement with his brother Henry. They produced pianofortes, instruments, they had jobs connected with music. And probably Henry, who was very successful, he was also a Freemason, he decided to make a branch of his firm in Birmingham. And John Benjamin Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien's grandfather, moved to Midlands, and this is why the Tolkien family of J.R. Tolkien was connected with that part of England. But you must remember, they started with London. And the migration from London to Birmingham was about 1843. And there, for example, his son, John Benjamin Tolkien, was born, the fourth of this name. They had few residences there. For example, I found them in Warwickshire, Bristol Road, then to Hayden Place, Bristol Road, Warwickshire, and then 21 Portland Villa, Erdington, Aston, Warwickshire, and the final residence when the firm of John Benjamin Tolkien was known and it was enlisted in the address books, it was New Street, 70 New Street in Birmingham. I haven't found any picture of this building because I was concerned with London. I didn't have still time to make big research in Birmingham, but I will try to do it and I will show you the results later. And unfortunately, his wife Jane Holmwood died when he was 47, and in 1856 he got married with Mary Jane Stowe, and she was mother of Arthur Reuel Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien's father. And the residence changed, as you can see here, many houses. And finally, when he was 64, he was pianoforte dealer and music seller. His son, John Benjamin Tolkien IV, was also a Freemason, and I have in the Masonic magazines some nice, interesting information. For example, his son composed a song for the Masonic meetings, and it was published as notes by his father, John Benjamin Tolkien. There is a mishmash with these John Benjamins because there were four of the same name. The first one, which arrived from Gdańsk to London in the 18th century. His oldest son, who was a gentleman, he worked in Norwich Union. Then we have the third one, Ronald Reuel Tolkien's grandfather, and also the fourth one. This was, of course, son of John Benjamin, older brother of Arthur Reuel Tolkien. And when Ronald Reuel Tolkien was born, he was to be named John Benjamin, the fifth of this name. But his mother Mabel didn't like this tradition of names, and she changed everything. So we have John Ronald Reuel Tolkien and not John Benjamin Tolkien. And the name Reuel is very interesting because it started this tradition with Arthur, and son of John Benjamin Tolkien. I can see the tradition of giving the middle names in memory of known or famous Protestant pastors which were connected with this family. And I found also a pastor whose surname was Reuel, and he was in Pentonville in London. Probably this middle name, Reuel, came from him. And now all descendants of Arthur Reuel Tolkien, male or female, all of them have this Reuel as middle name. Even, the living daughter of J.R. Tolkien, Mrs. Priscilla Reuel Tolkien, and also younger people who are in this family, like my colleague Nicholas Reuel Tolkien, who cooperates with me in my genealogical research. So you can see here many residences. He changed a lot, and his death, after the death of his son Arthur in South Africa, it was in the death was in West Bromwich, Kings Norton, Worcestershire, so Midlands, close to Birmingham. And now let us see his father. His father was George Tolkien. This gentleman was born in the 18th century, a very interesting person, not very known by the biographers. I found many interesting information about him. For instance, he was a bass singer in Covent Garden, in the same theater where the Lord of the Rings musical was played not so long ago, when we had our Tolkien travel to England, one of the first travels made here from Poland. We gathered people loving the Tolkien books and England, and we traveled together to England. We were to this musical, and then when we were there, no one knew that J.R. Tolkien's great-grandfather was an employee of this theater in the 19th century. He was a bass singer, and he's enlisted on many posters of musicals and operas as simply Tolkien. But this was George Tolkien. He was born in 1784, also on the same street, 77 White Lion Street, as his son, John Benjamin Tolkien, professor's grandfather. And he started to prepare for his job as farrier when he was very young, probably 17 years old, in the workshop of his uncle, Daniel Gottlieb Tolkien, of his father's brother. But as I can see in the documents, he had to stop because his girlfriend, Eliza Lydia Marrel, who was an orphan, she was pregnant. And 3 months after the marriage, the first son was born, George William Tolkien. And altogether, they had 14 children, a lot of children. They had to love each other very, very much. They had a lot of children, and George Tolkien died very young, in my opinion. He was 55, and he was buried in London on the burial place of St. George the Martyr. And here you can see his occupation, Drury Lane Theatre, as a bass singer. He was also a music teacher. He was one of 11 candidates as an organist in the Church of St. Stephen Walbrook in the City of London. And he was a house agent earlier in his life. A very interesting person. I'm very sorry I don't have any picture, any drawing how he looked. Also his son, John Benjamin Tolkien. The oldest family photo we have is of Henry Tolkien, one of his sons, who was born in 1814. So this is George Tolkien, a musician, person who should be connected with Drury Lane Theatre Royal. And his father, a very interesting person. This is the start of my research, in fact, because I discovered the place of birth of this person. This is John Benjamin Tolkien I. He was born in June 1752 in Petershagen, Gdańsk, Danzig, in Poland. It was a part of Poland, in spite the city was German-speaking, Protestant, like Elbing, or Toruń in Polish. These towns were some kind of German colonies in Poland, because they were founded by the Teutonic Knights, Teutonic Order in Middle Ages, and many German immigrants founded these places. And in the 16th century, when the Protestant revolution in religion began, also these towns became Protestant. And Gdańsk was partly Lutheran and partly Calvinist. And John Benjamin Tolkien was one of 4 children of Christian Tolkien and Anna Eufrosina Bergholz. He had older brother, who was Daniel Gottlieb Tolkien, born in 1746. He had also 2 sisters, Anna Elizabeth, later Stobbe, and Eleonora Renata Bergman Tolkien, but later Bergman. And Bergmans were the next generation in Gdańsk, who lived in the same place, in the same small house in Petershagen, which I also discovered. I know where this house stood, how it looked. If you are able, I can show you a Lego reconstruction of this house. And this is here Christian Tolkien, the father of the Tolkien family. So this person John Benjamin Tolkien is very interesting because he was born in Poland, in German-speaking town. He was Protestant, Lutheran. He was German-speaking. Probably he didn't know Polish language, and his father had many problems. He was a soldier in Gdańsk. Gdańsk was in danger of Prussian occupation, and they also had to live in the time of crisis because the Prussians surrounded the city and they cut all the commercial contacts. And Gdańsk was a Baltic town which was very rich because of economy of Hansa, and they had contacts with Amsterdam, London, Bergen in Norway, all Baltic Sea, and commerce and craftsmanship was very known in Gdańsk. Gdańsk's budget was as big as budget of all Poland in the time. So it was a very rich town. But in the 70s of the 18th century, it had many economical problems, and young people usually emigrated from Gdańsk to other places. And his brother, Daniel Gottlieb, when he was 20, he emigrated to Amsterdam first and then to London. And then he attracted his brother. So two brothers, Daniel Gottlieb and John Benjamin, became this inhabitants of England. And Daniel Gottlieb, the older brother, also became a citizen. He had the act of naturalization in 1794. And John Benjamin Tolkien, our professor's great-great-grandfather, never had the citizenship of England. Only his children born in England became English. He died as a foreigner. It's also it can be known also from the English documents from that time. So our John Benjamin Tolkien, professor's great-great-grandfather, arrived to London about 1772. He became a member of the Lutheran parish in Savoy in London, and he got married in 1777 with Mary Warner. He had two daughters with her, Elizabeth and Anna Maria, and probably he spoke German at home. He learned English slowly because it was not so easy for them. But I can see in the documents that during the second marriage, he subscribed not Johann but John, so he became a person who spoke English as well. And his wife, who belonged to this Calvinistic Methodists community of Lady of Huntington, she died, and very soon he got married with Mary Wall, and with Mary Wall he had sons. So with Mary Warner he had daughters, and with Mary Wall he had sons. And there were Benjamin Tolkien, who died very soon, George Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien's great-grandfather, and also John Benjamin Tolkien, the second of this name in England. And he became a gentleman. He worked in Norwich Union. He died in Brighton. A very interesting person. I can see him as a member of Christianity, very connected with German-speaking Moravian brothers who made one of the main roles in making Methodism. So when we speak about the lives of Tolkien's in the 18th century, we must connect them with changes, with spiritual revolution, I can say, connected with making Methodism in two branches, because Daniel Gottlieb, the older brother, became connected with John Wesley. He was a typical Methodist, Arminian, And his brother had to be different, I think, maybe because of the wives. He became connected with Calvinistic Methodism, and these two branches of Methodism were not, in one particular moment, they split, so they were not connected, because one of them was Calvinistic, predestination and other things, very Puritan, and these of John Wesley, of Daniel Gottlieb, of my American Tolkiens I am in contact with. They had, in my opinion, this form of Christianity more similar to my Christianity, to Catholicism. And here you can see the residences. John Benjamin Tolkien moved to Pentonville. Their chapel was St. James's Pentonville Chapel, connected also with Lady of Huntingdon, and he was buried in, and his grave still exists, in Bunhill Fields, London, Nonconformist Cemetery. And now we can see his father, Christian Tolkien. Christian Tolkien was born in 1706 in Kreuzburg in Prussia, so not in Gdańsk. He migrated to Gdańsk when he was very young because the Kingdom of Prussia was a place difficult to stay for young men, because its army was very hard. Young people had to serve in army very long, and it was difficult for their lives. So many young people flew from Prussia to Gdańsk, to other places in Europe, and then the Prussian militaristic state tried to find them and to take them back home. So it was also the fate of the Tolkien brothers who migrated to Gdańsk. There were two of them, Christian and his younger brother Michael. Michael became a farrier in Gdańsk, and Christian became a soldier of the Gdańsk army of Gdańsk, so he was artillerist. I have documents also from their baptisms, and I know their godparents. It's very important when you try to reconstruct the lives of people in the past, to see also who their neighbors were or godparents, because it tells a lot about the social position of these people. And his first wife was Helena Pokrowska, the Polish family name, but she died. And then he came to Gdańsk. He became artillerist, first cannoneer, bombardier, then a Feuerwerker. So it means the fire worker. It brings to my mind Gandalf, who made beautiful fireworks. So I must say that I believe in genetic memory. And he got married for the second time as a widower when he was 39 with Anna Eufrosina Bergholz, and they had children, 4 children, among them John Benjamin Tolkien. When their sons migrated to England, the family was very poor, but they were probably members of a Christian structure inside of Lutheranism, which was very similar to the position of Methodists. So it was pietistic, I don't know the English name, piety, pietistic community inside of Lutheranism, which was very popular in this suburb where they lived. It was Petershagen. Their church, St. Salvator, was very famous of being nonconformist. So I think this nonconformity and searching for new ways in Christianity was in this family, also in Gdańsk, not only in London. So you can see here that he lived by Letzte Gasse, number 28 in Petershagen, Danzig. And when Christian Tolkien was 85, he died in Gdańsk, and he was buried in Petershagen. Unfortunately, this cemetery doesn't exist anymore. It is a playground of a school in this suburb now. And the father of Christian Tolkien was also Christian Tolkien. He was fourth great-grandfather of J.R. Tolkien. He was born in Zolau, close to Kreuzberg, but his family came from Kreuzberg. And he was a baker. So interesting job. He was not a nobility. He was not a noble person with a coat of arms as the Tolkien family thought in England. They had family tradition that they were nobility in Germany and they had to come to England because of the Prussian danger. But in my research, I found out that they were not nobility, they were simply craftsmen and also mayors in the villages. So not peasants, not very low position in the society, middle class, I think. Middle class in that time. It is, as you can see here, 17th century, 18th century. Christian Tolkien was born in 1677 and he died in 1746. I found that he got married when he was 27 with Regina Witt, and they had many children. Many of them stayed in Kreuzberg. For example, I will show you Christoph Tolkien here. He was a shoemaker later, and many Tolkiens who, for example, were mayors of Kreuzberg in 18th century were descendants of this Christoph Tolkien. And Christian Tolkien the first, as a baker, he died when he was 69. His father, known from the parish books, was Michel Tolkin, who had a cousin, Michel Tolkin. There were two Michel Tolkins in this parish, and one of them was signed as XB. It means Kreuzberg, because he was a citizen of the town. And another Michel Tolkin was Glab. So he was from Glabunen, a Prussian village very close to Kreuzberg. So they were cousins. And here you can see that this Michel Tolkin was born about 1644 and he died in 1699. I don't know what his occupation was, but it was probably connected with military in the town, because many important and noble persons from Kreuzberg were present during his son's Michael's baptism. And I can see from the tradition of Prussia and Gdańsk that it was typical for people who served in the militia of the town, for example. And he died in Kreuzberg in 1699. And his father was Michel Tolkin. This person could speak Prussian language, not only German, but also the Baltic language, Prussian, which was a typical language for this part of Europe before Germanization. They were cousins of Lithuanians and Latvians, so this was not Slavic language, it was Baltic language, very beautiful. I try to learn this language, but it's very hard. Of course, we don't know a lot about this language, but I think that Professor Tolkien would be very interested with this if he knew for sure that his ancestors came from the Baltic shores, not from Saxony. And this Michel Tolkien was born probably about 1620 and he died probably at about 1678. So you can see here that deeper in the past we know less. And I am not sure what his occupation was, but he was a citizen of Kreuzberg. And the first Tolkien we find in the documents of Kreuzberg, I am not sure if he was a father of Michel, but probably yes. The only Tolkien we find in a list of citizens of Kreuzberg in 1614 was Friedrich Tolkin. And this was probably seventh great-grandfather of J.R. Tolkien. And he was simply a burgher, so citizen. who didn't pay tribute to the new duke. In this time, the dukes of Prussia were Protestant, but the first duke in the 17th century was not Lutheran, he was Calvinist, and there was opposition against him, and probably Friedrich Tolkin, as an Orthodox Lutheran, he didn't like the new duke, and he didn't want to pay the tribute to him. This is the only document we know about him. And now we have some kind of probability that his father was Jakob Tolkeimer, who was a man living in the village Globunen. I suppose my theory is that the Tolkiens from Globunen and Tolkiens from Kreuzburg, who were for sure cousins, that they all came to Kreuzburg from Globunen, from this village. And in Globunen, I find the Tolkiens in the 16th century. One of them is Jakob Tolkeimer, and there was a small village, in fact, it was close to Wogau, and it was called Tolkheim. It means a village of translator. Translator was a very important position in the society in these early times of Prussia, because the people in the village, they didn't speak German, they spoke Baltic language, Old Prussian. And when they attended the church, Lutheran church, and they had they had to pay taxes, they had to have a translator, negotiator, who was a person who knew German and Prussian. And there were many talks in every parish. There were talks who worked in the church as the translators and negotiators in inns. And my theory is that the ancestors of J.R. Tolkien were negotiators, talks, who lived in the village Wogau. They had some free goods there from the 14th century, and they were called Tolkien. The first of them was in the document called Tolkien II Wogau, and they founded also a small village, Tolkheim, which was the village of Tolk, and they worked there also as negotiators in this inn, because in fact Tolkheim was an inn, a very old inn. And I think this is the beginning of the family. I am sorry it was so long. I hope it was not very boring to you. I will try to record new material for you in a few days, because I would like to tell more about the Tolkiens in England. I found many interesting things recently. For instance, 2 days ago, I received Camberwell Old Cemetery plan with the tomb or grave of John Benjamin Tolkien IV. And I would like to tell you about the Tolkien's Freemasons, about their faith, about this, what was pedo-baptism, and other things, which are, in my opinion, very interesting. I hope my English was understandable. Thank you, and see you next time.